So today we're going to look at the AP BCD, or as some people know it, the Buddy Commando, Buddy Explorer BCD. AP Diving basically do two types of this style of BCD. Do the Explorer and do the Buddy Commando. They're very similar, other than the Buddy Commando has a longer back, which tends to be more suited to taller people or men. And this one, which is a shorter back, so it tends to be suitable more to women. Other than that, they're both really good, very robust, hard-wearing BCDs, but they do have a couple of issues that people need to be aware of. So I've been diving for 35 years plus, and I've always used Buddy Commandos, their type of diving kit. A couple of reasons. I love the fact they've got this double bag design. So inside there's a bladder, and it's made of a plastic material which looks a bit like the same sort of fabric as they have in airbags in cars, so it's very resilient. And it does mean that if for any reason the airbag gets punctured, you can replace the bladder inside and you don't lose the whole jacket, just a new bladder. And if the bladder does get a leak in it, you can patch them as well. Also, if the seam splits for any reason, that's a warranty claim, and AP will replace the bladder free of charge for you, so that's very positive. I also like the fact that AP Diving do all the spares for these, so no matter what you need, you can buy the spare part. We've got a number of members in our dive club, and they've got a whole range of different BCDs, and what happens is something breaks, a small plastic bracket or a clip or something, and the manufacturer saying, sorry, we don't do that anymore, you can't get that part. So basically you're looking around there for second-hand parts or replacement parts that will do the same job, but the reality is they're very hard to get hold of for a lot of other BCDs. AP have all the spares. You go on their website, you just order it, part comes internationally, they do post internationally all over the place, and the parts come within literally a matter of a couple of days. So the question I always get asked is, why do I like Buddy Commandos or Buddy Explorers? Well, it comes down to the amount of buoyancy in the jacket and the fact that they give you a head-up position on the surface, even with the integrated weights in them, which means that they'll let you sit like that in the water with your head here, water level somewhere here, and that means you can breathe on the surface. So if you had a diving incident, you got a distressed diver, or you brought an unconscious diver up or whatever, you know when you're on the surface, it takes no effort from his buddy to keep the head above the water. Because of the way the buoyancy sits on this jacket, it also means that when you're doing surface finning, you can do it lying on your back. And as we all know, if you swim into a shot line or return to a dive boat or whatever, the most relaxing way to swim along on the surface is on your back. Otherwise you're going to be using a snorkel if you're face down. And a lot of other BCDs do push your face down, particularly wings. I've seen a lot of other makes and they've got the same problem, head down rather than head up position. That's why I like these particular jackets. So what's the downside with these type of BCDs? Well, I've had a couple of them break clips, and it's usually here, the crack on this seam here, where you can see the moulding seam. That's where they crack, they tend to split there. It's very rare, but it does happen. I've also had one jacket in 30 years where the bladder itself had split on the seam, and AP just replaced the bladder free of charge, so there's no problem there. The biggest problem with this jacket is this and the Schrader valve inside. AP do not recommend use a corrugated hose for dumping air, but as we all know, all diving agencies teach dumping air through the corrugated hose. So what they've done with this one is you pull it and it dumps from here. Well, of course people aren't taught to do that. People are taught to do this and then dump. And the problem with that is it allows water to ingress into the Schrader valve, and slowly over time this particular valve will actually corrode. I'm going to take this apart shortly and show you what's inside it and why it actually corrodes, and how a simple way of actually making sure that doesn't happen. So let's make a start on stripping down this mouthpiece on this Buddy Explorer. They're exactly the same mouthpiece on the Buddy Commando as well. First of all, to clip off the tie straps, pull this through, and you'll see stainless steel pin. Push the pin out a little bit, see, now the mouthpiece is detached. You can already see that this is going to be a messy one inside by the amount of corrosion around the mouthpiece there. Okay, so let's get our container for all of our parts. Let's start the clip off cable tie, take the mouthpiece off. Unscrew the end. Unscrew this one. It's tight. Be careful not to damage the plastic when you're using pliers or whatever, just to free them off. See how corroded this is inside? This is what happens when you get salt water in them and you don't clean them out properly. Remove the inflator. In here you'll see a little O-ring. Now AP Diving do a service kit for these, so you can actually get all these parts separately if you need them. Well, the next one to pull out is this part here. Gently pulling it. Don't worry if it comes apart, because you can rebuild them inside. And there you go. Now watch it, because there is an O-ring which sits on this seal edge here. Sometimes you find it in here, sometimes you find it around here. On this seal here. Oh, there it is. There's the O-ring. And your fine O-ring. Okay. Now this is the problem, getting this unit out from this corroded housing. You can see the Schrader valve in there, and that is completely corroded in. So before I even touch that, I'm going to soak this now in some distilled vinegar for a while to try and get rid of as much of this corrosion as possible. You'll also notice down there there's a little mesh. We'll get that out later when we take this whole valve assembly out. Okay, so the whole assembly is now in my vinegar bath. I'm going to leave that now for about half an hour so we can get rid of as much of that actually corrosion as possible around that Schrader valve and the actual assembly. Okay, so it's been soaking now for half an hour or so, and as you can see all the actual corrosion has disappeared. So now we're going to take the valve out so we can actually have a look at it and take the mesh filter out and stuff. So I've made a simple tool. This is basically a piece of umbrella wire, so it's nice and strong. You slide it through the hole, up inside, and then gently prise the valve up. Very carefully now grab a valve, slide it out, and as you can see that's now come out. I'll put that back in the vinegar solution to get rid of the rest of this green corrosion, and then we'll start trying to strip it down. Okay, so let's have a look. That's had about another 5 or 10 minutes, and you'll see most of the corrosion's come off it. I'm going to get a small wire brush now, just remove the last of that corrosion off it, and then we'll have a go at taking the valve out. Okay, so here we go. So as you can see, taking off most of the actual green corrosion. This is not that bad in reality. I've seen much worse than this, but again, if you decide you want to replace it, AP Valves, they do a whole kit which includes this valve and the whole assembly. Okay, we're now going to take the Schrader valve out the bottom. Simple valve removal tool. Oh, that one's, yep, looks like it's coming out. Sometimes they don't come out, sometimes they snap off and you have to push them out, but other than that, this one's coming out by the looks of it. Okay. Maybe not. So the threads have unscrewed out, and this is just the actual unit stuck in the bottom now. So the secret to get the mesh filter out of here so you can get the seized Schrader valve out is to push the mesh in slightly so you dome it, and now tap it out, and there's the filter. It's just come out. Oops. Filter just come out. Now screwdriver in the hole. There's the bottom of the Schrader valve, you can see that. Get underneath it and push. There you go. And there's the valve. So we've unscrewed the threaded part out, and this is the bit that was seized, and that is well seized. There's no way that valve's working. So that's been taken out now. Because the mouthpiece was so seized, I'm also going to take this valve off and just check it out to make sure inside there's no corrosion at this end, and also helps us put the other end on as well. So to take these off, just unscrew them. Comes out. Push the connecting rod cable and that'll bring this plug out. Disconnect it, get the spring out, and then we'll clean all them parts as we did before. So here's all the parts now out of the ultrasonic cleaner, and this is the bag of stainless steel Schrader valves I got them off Amazon, I think it was. There's the part number if you want to see it. Anyway, okay, so now we're going to rebuild all of these parts into the mouthpiece. So we start by putting the new Schrader valve into the actual valve unit itself. So let's start to rebuild the unit. I like to use a touch of silicone grease on everything, so smallest touch of silicone grease on the valve, sit it in, just like with a car, quarter turn, it's all done. Now if you remember, we had that small mesh filter. We just need to flatten it again, make sure it's clean, and then push it into here. I put a small amount, very small amount, silicone on the actual body. This is what I do. You can do whatever you want on yours. This is just to make sure it lubricates and slides in well. Now we slide it into the body, plastic body, and it should sit like that in that position. It's got guides, so you can't really go wrong with it. Now you've got your plunger. This sits over the top of that, and then you've got your actual retaining ring. These only need to be finger tight. Okay, now I've got the O-ring which goes in, and again, merest touch silicone grease on them, just help them bed, and then drop it in. Now the O-ring's sat at the bottom nice and neat. Now the inflator itself with the O-ring, again, touch of silicone grease on the O-ring, fit it onto the inflator boss. Now you can see there the step where the other O-ring will engage with it. Now it's fully engaged, and the retaining ring. Nice and tight, and I can feel it working correctly as well. This is the awkward one. Again, touch silicone grease on the O-ring. Now this just sits on a lip. If you remember, it was difficult to find this when we started because it was so corroded on. Now it sits there on the lip. Now what you have to do is get it to sit in there. Now there's a nice chamfered edge, but sometimes you will nip these when you put them in, and the secret is to make sure it goes in perfectly square as you push it in. There you go, that one's gone in beautiful. And again now, faceplate on. You know when it's tight because the body wording should be sort of parallel. Okay, on goes mouthpiece, new cable tie on that. I'll be ready to install it back on the jacket. You'll recall from before we also took the actual dump valve from the back of the corrugated hose, so we need to rebuild that first before we put the mouthpiece on. So the spring goes in, broadest end first, then the actual plug itself. Push these in, nice and free, Okay, so we need to find, there it is, the actual pull cord itself. You'll notice I've pushed the actual stainless steel rod halfway through, just enough space to be able to fit this over it, and then slide it through till it engages. Level it off on both sides so it's in the middle. It gets held in place by the corrugated hose, so it's no problem. And now this should all line up. You can put a new cable tie on there in a second. Let's first rebuild the hose. Now you can see how that's pulled that in slightly. That gives us the space that we need to sit the O-ring in and be able to, whoops, and then be able to screw on the back valve. Okay, with all of these jackets, what you need to do next is you need to, obviously don't put the cable tie on it, inflate it, leave it on the hose, put it in a bucket of water, make sure there's no leaks or anything from it. If there is, go back and check where it's leaking from. Other than that, the next thing to do is fully inflate the jacket and see if it holds the actual air. It should hold the air no problem and stay inflated. Once you've done all that, you've done it. Now it's up to you. You can service these like I've shown you, or you can send it off to AP Valves. AP Valves do a service kit for these. They will also service it at their factory. It's down south somewhere, I can't remember where, but yeah, they will also service that for you, as they will service a stab jacket. It's up to you. But you know, the problem with the Schrader valve is not unique to these particular jackets. Lots of mouthpieces use Schrader valves, some don't, but the majority do, and this is quite a common problem with lots of jackets have this particular problem. Other than that, the BCD is a great BCD to have. And I've got to say, I'm quite pleased with them, and they're so cheap to maintain. I'd say it's cost me that to fix that. I don't think I've had to replace the seals on one of these, although they do come in the service kit, so you can replace them if you think you need new seals on it as well. I'll now put the cable tie on there, and then this is done and ready to use. Thank you for watching.